My son once told me, "Dad, you're the reason this business exists." I used to hold on to that. I used to believe it meant loyalty, respect, partnership, a future we'd build together. But the day he walked into my office with his wife beside him, everything changed. They weren't smiling. They weren't grateful. They weren't even my family in that moment. They told me I didn't deserve my own business. Not anymore. And if you think that sentence broke something in me, you're right. Stay with me. Because the moment they tried to take it all, they unleashed a part of me they never knew existed. My name is David, and for most of my life, I believed the purpose of a father was to build something strong enough for his children to inherit. A home, a legacy, a business that could shelter them from the kind of storms I'd faced. That belief kept me going through decades of 12-hour days. Through winters when the shop floor was so cold the metal tools stung my hands. Through summers when the machines overheated and I had to choose between shutting down or pushing through the discomfort. I pushed through every time. Because back then the future looked like my son, Eric, taking the reins one day. Eric grew up around the clang of steel and the smell of welding fumes. As a kid, he'd wander the shop with earmuffs too big for his head and point at everything he didn't understand. I used to smile, thinking one day I'd teach him all of it. But life rarely unfolds the way you script it. Eric changed when he met Megan. She was sharp, ambitious, confident in a way that left no room for anyone else's voice. At first I liked her. She seemed to motivate him. She talked about future planning and modernizing operations, things Eric used to shrug off. But the more she spoke, the more Eric stopped listening to me. It started small. He'd question why I handled payroll a certain way, why I insisted on inspecting every major order myself, why I still used the old vendor for raw aluminum. I'd answer patiently, explaining the relationships I'd built over 30 years, the way consistency was the backbone of our work. But every time, he'd look back at Megan for approval, not me. And she'd give him that tight smile, the one that pretended to be polite while hiding something sharper beneath it. I ignored it. For months. Maybe longer than I should have. Employees noticed the shift. Some whispered that Megan was practically running things behind the scenes. Others said she spent more time in my office than I did. I brushed it off as gossip because believing it meant admitting something was wrong. Then came the first big crack. One morning I walked into the office and found Eric in my chair, flipping through my old client binders. Megan stood behind him with her arms crossed. They didn't move when I came in, didn't greet me, didn't look apologetic. Eric just said, "Dad, we need to talk about restructuring. Things can't stay the way they are." I felt something cold settle in my chest, but I still tried to be calm. I said, "Eric, sit with me. Let's go through changes together." But Megan stepped forward instead. "David, with respect, you don't have the energy for this anymore. You should enjoy life. Let us handle the business side." Let us, not him. I remember staring at her, trying to understand when she'd been promoted to decision maker. Eric avoided my eyes. The next few weeks were worse. They started holding meetings without me. They redrafted employees' schedules. They told vendors to speak directly with them. And the employees, good men and women who'd been with me for decades, looked torn between loyalty and fear. The final blow came on a rainy Thursday. They brought paperwork, a thick stack, printed neatly, clipped, highlighted. Eric said, "Dad, these are routine documents to help streamline operations. Just some updates, nothing major." Megan didn't speak. She didn't have to. She pushed the pen toward me with a look that said everything. Something in me hesitated. Not fear, instinct. I read the first page, and the second. Nothing glaring, nothing alarming, but the wording felt slippery. I said, "I want to take these home." Megan's smile vanished. She said, "There's no need for that. It's standard." But Eric, my son, leaned forward and whispered, "Dad, don't make this difficult." That sentence cut deeper than anything Megan ever said. I took the papers anyway, and when I read them that night, sitting alone at my kitchen table with a cup of cold coffee, my hand started shaking. It wasn't routine. It wasn't simple. It was a transfer of ownership. From me to Eric. If I had signed it, I would have handed over everything I built. The company, the building, the assets, the accounts. 30 years of my life gone with one signature. I sat there staring at the pages, feeling a kind of grief I hadn't known before. Not for the business, for my son, for the realization that he saw me not as a father, but an obstacle. But here's the part they never saw coming. They thought I was predictable, old, tired, easy to manipulate. They forgot who built this company from nothing. They forgot who survived recessions, lawsuits, supply crises, and a partner who once tried to push me out decades earlier. And because of that old betrayal, I had something they didn't know existed. A contract, a silent weapon they had no idea was waiting. I barely slept that night. The papers stayed on the table, spread out like crime scene evidence. Every time I reread a paragraph, the intent became clearer. Eric and Megan weren't trying to streamline anything. They were staging a quiet coup, a takeover disguised as paperwork. And the signature they wanted from me would have finished the job. By sunrise, I felt hollow, not angry, not yet, just emptied out. I kept asking myself where I went wrong. Was I too soft on Eric growing up? Did I give him too much? Did I make him believe that everything in his life would always come easy? But the moment Megan walked into the shop that morning, everything inside me hardened. She didn't look nervous. She didn't even look curious about my decision. She looked certain, as if she already believed the company was hers, as if 30 years of my sweat and sacrifice were nothing more than a stepping stone for her ambitions. "David," she said without any warmth, "did you sign the documents?" I didn't answer. I just walked past her straight to my office. Eric followed me in, shutting the door behind him. "Dad," he said, "you're overthinking this. This is what's best for the future. We can't move forward unless you trust us." There was something chilling about the way he said we. He didn't mean himself and me. He meant himself and Megan. I looked at him and asked, "Did you read these papers? Really read them?" He hesitated. And that hesitation told me everything. He didn't read them. He didn't care to. He trusted Megan to handle the thinking. He trusted her more than he trusted me. I placed the papers on the table between us. "These transfer ownership, Eric." His face tightened. He tried to hide it, but the shock was real. Megan must not have told him the truth. Or maybe she had, and he just didn't want to face the ugliness of it. "Either way," he said, "Dad, we're trying to protect the company. You're tired. You get overwhelmed. You're making mistakes." Those words, "you're making mistakes," echoed in my head like a hammer hitting steel. I had made mistakes, sure. Every business owner does. But none of my mistakes ever involved betraying my own blood. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just gathered the papers, put them into a folder, and said, "I'll look at them with a lawyer." That sentence changed the air in the room. Megan's voice sliced through the doorway. "A lawyer? David, that's unnecessary. This is a family matter." I looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't see my son's wife. "I saw the architect of all of this," I said. "Exactly, and that's why I'm being careful." The moment the words left my mouth, Megan's eyes went cold. Truly cold. Eric tried to play peacemaker, but the facade was breaking. They weren't worried about hurting my feelings. They were worried about losing control. For the next 2 days, they treated me like an intruder in my own building. They held closed-door meetings. They whispered to employees. They acted as if I had already stepped aside. Fine, let them. Because while they were busy celebrating their premature victory, I was opening a safe deposit box I hadn't touched in 8 years. Inside was the contract. Thick paper, 4 signatures. An agreement between me and Thomas Reed, the man who once tried to force me out of the company in my 40s. We had ended that war with a settlement, and part of that settlement was a contingency clause, a clause stating that if any party attempted to manipulate ownership without full transparency and consent, the original ownership would revert to me. Fully, automatically. I remember holding that contract, feeling the weight of it. It wasn't just paper, it was armor. It was protection against a betrayal I thought I'd never face again. And here I was, fighting that same war, but this time against my own son. As I walked out of the bank vault that day, I made a decision. I would not let Eric destroy himself by destroying me, and I would not let Megan walk away with a single piece of what I built. They wanted a war, but they had no idea I'd already won it 8 years ago. I didn't tell them right away. That was the hardest part. Holding the truth in my hands while they walked around acting like they'd already buried me. But I needed time. I needed clarity. And I needed to make sure the contract was still legally airtight. So the next morning, I drove to see the one person who had helped me survive the first coup in my life. My old friend and attorney, Michael Lane. He's the kind of man who reads contracts the way surgeons read x-rays. Calm, careful, deadly precise. When I placed the document on his desk, he didn't ask questions. He just adjusted his glasses and started reading. I sat there, hands locked together, feeling my pulse in my fingertips. After a few minutes, he said, "David, where did you dig this relic up?" "Safe deposit box. I always kept it." He kept reading. His expression didn't change much, but his eyebrows lifted once, then again. And when he finally looked up at me, there was a slow, knowing smile spreading across his face. "Your son and his wife have no clue what they triggered." I swallowed. "So it's still active?" "Active. David, this is a nuclear weapon. The contingency clause is explicit. Any attempt to transfer controlling interest without your informed consent reverts 100% ownership to you. And considering they presented documents with misleading headers, that counts as deceptive intent." I leaned back in my chair, exhaling a breath so heavy it felt like it carried 8 years of dust. Then he added, "This doesn't just revert ownership, it entitles you to damages." My heartbeat stumbled. "How much?" He tapped the contract. "Liquidated damages of up to double the assessed market value of your lost control, roughly $550,000. Plus penalty interest, plus legal fees." I stared at the ceiling and whispered, "They tried to steal the company, and instead they're going to end up paying me over $1 million. Michael nodded. "If you want to pursue it, you're in the driver's seat." That sentence lit something inside me. For the first time since this nightmare started, I felt power returning to my spine. But then the guilt pushed in. Eric was still my son. And no matter what he had become under Megan's influence, he was still the boy who once brought me breakfast on Father's Day that he cooked with his own little hands. The boy who used to run to me on the shop floor and say, "Dad, look how strong I'm getting." But I couldn't let nostalgia protect him, not from the consequences, because if I backed down now, I wouldn't just lose my business, I'd lose myself. So I told Michael, "Prepare everything, I'm not letting them walk over me." He nodded, already dialing numbers. He lived for moments like these. When I left his office, the air outside felt different, lighter, sharper, like the world was suddenly paying attention again. I drove straight to the company. Eric and Megan were in my office. My office, door closed, lights on, their voices low. When I opened the door, they froze like kids caught stealing cookies, except their cookies were my entire livelihood. Megan recovered first, she always did. "David," she said, "have you had time to think about the documents?" I placed the folder on the desk between us. Calm, controlled, letting silence stretch until her confidence started to crack. Eric shifted. "Dad, we don't want this to be uncomfortable. We're trying to help you transition." Transition. The word felt like poison. I said, "You want honesty? Fine. I read the documents completely, and I know exactly what you were trying to do." Eric swallowed. Megan stiffened, her jaw tightening. Then I added, "You should have told me the truth." Eric glanced at Megan, just a flicker, but it told me everything. He didn't even realize the extent of what she'd proposed. He trusted her blindly, and she used that trust like a weapon. I reached into the folder, pulled out the contract, and placed it gently in the center of the desk. Megan leaned forward to read it, and the moment she recognized the wording, legal, old-fashioned, ironclad, her face lost its color. What is this?" she asked. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "This," I said, "is the agreement I signed years before you ever entered this family. A protection clause, a contingency contract, legally binding, and still enforceable." Eric looked confused. "Dad, I don't understand." "You tried to transfer my ownership without my consent," I said. "That activates the clause." Megan stood straighter, forcing a smile. "David, this is outdated." "No," I cut in softly, "it's not. My lawyer confirmed it this morning." There was a full second of silence. It hung in the room like a blade. Eric's voice cracked. "Dad, what does this mean?" "It means," I said, steady and slow, "that everything reverts to me, 100%. Every share, every asset, every decision." Eric stumbled back into my chair. Megan didn't move. She just stared at the contract like it was a ghost rising from the past. And, I added, you both now owe me financial damages. Significant damages. Megan finally snapped out of her shock. You can't possibly... I can, I said. I already started the process. Eric looked at Megan, betrayed. You told me it was simple paperwork. You said it was just restructuring. Megan hissed. I didn't think he'd remember some ancient document. And that, I said, was your biggest mistake. Eric covered his face with both hands. Megan grabbed her bag like she needed to escape before reality caught her fully. But it already had. I looked at both of them, letting the truth settle. You tried to take everything from me, and you lost more than you ever imagined. Neither of them spoke. Neither of them could. In that moment, I wasn't angry. I wasn't shouting. I felt free, because for the first time in years, I remembered who I was. The man who built this place. The man they underestimated. The man they tried to replace. And the man who just took it all back. The fallout didn't explode all at once. It unfolded slowly, like a storm creeping across the horizon, darkening everything in its path. Eric and Megan left my office without another word. She kept her chin high, pretending she still had control. He walked behind her like a man waking up from anesthesia, realizing too late what he'd agreed to. I sat alone for a long time after they were gone. I wasn't celebrating. I wasn't even relieved. I just felt tired. Betrayal has a weight to it, a heaviness that settles in your bones. And knowing your own child helped orchestrate it. That's the kind of weight that doesn't disappear overnight. But I couldn't sit in those feelings for long. There was work to do. The next morning I met with Michael again. He had already drafted the filings, organized evidence, and compiled a timeline of events. He always worked fast, but this time he seemed fueled by something extra, anger on my behalf. He said, David, you understand what's about to happen, right? This isn't a scolding. This is a full legal reversal. They're going to lose every inch of ground they stood on. I nodded. I know. And they will owe you money. Another nod. A slower one. Over $1 million, potentially. His eyes softened. You sure you want to go through with this? It'll burn the bridge completely. I leaned back in the chair. They lit the match. I'm just refusing to suffocate in their smoke. He nodded and pushed the documents toward me. I signed everything without hesitation. My hand didn't shake once. Word spread inside the company within hours. Not the details, just that something major had shifted. Employees who had been nervous suddenly stood taller. Some even smiled at me again, like they were relieved I hadn't abandoned them. By noon, Megan stormed into the building. She didn't knock. She didn't wait for me to invite her in. She just barged into my office with her phone in hand, shaking with fury. David, we need to talk now. I looked at her calmly. I'm busy. You started legal proceedings against us? She snapped. Are you out of your mind? I closed the folder in front of me. No, I'm protecting what's mine. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. You're going to ruin Eric. He'll lose everything. His credit, his savings, his reputation. I cut her off. Eric made his choices. She glared at me, but there was something new in her eyes. Fear. This isn't over, she said. I leaned forward. It is. The contract is airtight. Your little plan is dead, and you'd better get a lawyer of your own. For the first time since I'd met her, she didn't have a comeback. She just left. Eric showed up that evening. No Megan, no confidence. Just a broken expression on his face. He stood in my living room, hands in his pockets, eyes on the floor. Dad, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. I believe you, I said. But you still tried to push me out. He nodded, swallowing hard. She kept telling me you were tired, that the company needed younger leadership, that we were protecting you. I let the silence stretch. He needed to feel it, really feel it. He whispered, I didn't read the documents. I trusted her. That's the last lesson I'll ever teach you, I said. Never sign something you don't understand, and never let someone else think for you. His voice cracked. Dad, please, is there anything I can do? Let the process run, I said. It's out of my hands now. He wiped his face and nodded slowly. Then he left. No hug, no apology strong enough to fix anything. Just a quiet exit from a chapter he never should have started. The legal process moved faster than expected. Michael coordinated everything, and within weeks the ownership officially reverted to me. The damages were calculated. The penalty interest was applied. The numbers rose higher than even he predicted. $1,140,000. Seeing it in writing didn't bring joy. It brought clarity. Their scheme wasn't just disrespect. It was theft. Planned, calculated theft. And now they were paying the price. Megan's reaction came in the form of a long, rage-filled email. I didn't reply. I forwarded it to Michael, who added it to the file. Eric tried to apologize again, this time over the phone. His voice was rough, exhausted. I listened, but I didn't soften. Some wounds need time, and some wounds never heal at all. The day the final legal documents were delivered, I sat alone in my office, looking out the window at the shop floor. My employees were working with a sense of steadiness again. The noise of welding and machinery echoed like it used to. Normal. Familiar. Mine. Michael called later that afternoon. "It's done," he said. "You've won every part of this." I closed my eyes. "Thank you." "You earned this, David. Don't let anyone make you feel guilty for protecting what you built." After the call, I stayed in the office long after closing, just sitting in the quiet. I thought about the past, the arguments, the little moments I ignored, the warning signs I brushed aside because I wanted peace more than clarity. But most of all, I thought about who I had become through all of this. Not a victim, not a frail man to be pushed aside, not someone ready to hand over his life's work because someone younger said he should. I was still the man who built the foundation, still the man who carried the weight, still the man who refused to break. And for the first time in years, I felt proud of myself again. Proud and ready for whatever came next. The days after the legal confirmation were strangely quiet. Eric and Megan hadn't spoken to me, and honestly, I didn't expect them to. Their silence was the final acknowledgement that they had lost, that their schemes had failed. The contract, the hidden safeguard I had nearly forgotten, had turned their world upside down, and it had restored mine. Walking through the shop that morning, I noticed the familiar sounds of machinery, the smell of oil and metal. Employees were busy, focused, productive, and they looked at me differently now. Respect, yes, but also relief. Relief that the person who had built this company hadn't been pushed aside. Relief that fairness had returned. It was a subtle power, but it hit harder than any shouting or confrontation ever could. I sat at my office desk with the signed documents, rereading the legal confirmations. $1.1 million restored, ownership fully mine, and the moral weight heavier still, proof that betrayal, no matter how close, can be countered with foresight and determination. I thought about Eric, my own son, and the innocence of the boy who had once helped me sweep the floor after a long day. It was almost tragic to see the man he had become, seduced by ambition and guided by someone else's cunning. But justice isn't cruel, it's precise. And in this case, it was beautifully precise. Megan's influence had taught me a lesson I hadn't expected. Vigilance. Trust, yes, but never blind trust, especially when it involves the future you've built from scratch. I realized how easily even those closest to you can exploit your generosity if you underestimate them. But I also realized that preparation is a shield, and wisdom can be your sharpest weapon. I called Michael, my attorney, and thanked him again. "You made this painless," I said. He laughed softly. "Painless? David, this was epic. You should feel proud." "I do," I admitted. "But it's more than pride, it's relief and closure." The next week, I restored the offices to their rightful state, returned leadership to myself, and ensured all employees knew the truth. No lectures, no dramatics, just the facts. Eric and Megan were informed legally of the damages, of the reversal, and of the consequences they had to face. Their reactions were muted. There were no confrontations, no shouting matches, just silence, and the heavy weight of realization that they had overstepped in the worst possible way. After that, life slowly returned to a rhythm that felt familiar. I spent mornings in the shop, afternoons reviewing new contracts, and evenings reflecting on the lessons this betrayal had taught me. I found a strange peace in knowing that, no matter how close betrayal can get, foresight and preparation can protect you. And perhaps, most importantly, it reminded me that your life's work, your legacy, is worth every ounce of vigilance you can muster. Eric eventually reached out, cautiously, attempting apologies that were awkward and unconvincing. I listened, but I didn't respond in anger. I merely reminded him of the lessons he should have learned. Responsibility, honesty, and respect for those who built the foundation. Megan's attempts to communicate were ignored entirely. Some bridges, once burned, are better left in ashes. Looking back, I realized something essential. Revenge isn't about cruelty. It isn't about seeing someone suffer for the sake of satisfaction. True revenge is about restoring balance, reclaiming what's rightfully yours, and teaching lessons that won't be forgotten. That day, with the contract in my hands and the company restored, I knew the lesson had been learned by everyone involved. To anyone watching this, remember, protect what you build, trust wisely, and never underestimate the power of preparation. If someone close tries to deceive you, make sure you have the tools to fight back, not out of anger, but to protect your life's work and your dignity. And if you want to hear the next story, about the neighbor who tried to claim part of my property and almost destroyed my house, you'll want to stay right here. Subscribe, because the next tale is one of clever strategy, confrontation, and undeniable justice. This isn't just a story, it's a blueprint for standing strong when betrayal comes knocking.